The Elmwood was the kind of place that felt suspended between worlds, somewhere between memory and dream. The warm amber glow of its wall sconces wrapped each table in a private cocoon, while the soft murmur of conversation blended with the gentle clinking of glasses. The faint scent of rosemary and butter drifted from the kitchen, and jazz from a hidden speaker hummed low, as if time itself had slowed. At a corner table by the window, Megan sat across from Patrick, unaware that this night would shatter everything she thought she knew. Outside, rain-slicked streets shimmered with reflections of passing headlights. Inside, everything felt unnervingly still, too still. Patrick had been unusually quiet all evening. He wasn't looking at her. His gaze was locked on the wine glass in his hand, the rim lightly pressed against his thumb. Megan tried to brush off the pit forming in her stomach. Maybe he was just tired, she told herself, distracted by work. But when he set the glass down, the dull clink sounded like it echoed through the entire restaurant. "I think we can't keep pretending this is working anymore, Megan." The words were calm, measured, but they hit her like an earthquake. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. Her breath caught. The laughter from nearby tables sounded distant, like it belonged to another world. She blinked, struggling to find her voice. What are you saying, Patrick?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, as if carrying this confession had worn him down for months. "I'm saying we should end this. I've met someone else." Her heart froze. The clinking of glasses faded to nothing. She stared at him, waiting for the cruel punchline that never came. Every muscle tensed, and she fought the tremor threatening to rise. "And everything we built, the life we shared, you're throwing it all away for some fantasy?" Patrick leaned back, expression oddly detached, almost relieved. "It's not a fantasy, Megan. People change. I'm changing." The candlelight flickered between them, casting shadows across his face. For a brief second, she didn't see the man she'd loved for 5 years, just a stranger wearing his voice. The Elmwood had been their place. Their celebrations, promotions, anniversaries, the small victories that had once felt enormous. Now, the same walls seemed to close in, trapping her in a moment she couldn't escape. "I didn't know you were this unhappy," she whispered, barely audible over the saxophone's soft notes. He said nothing. Instead, he pushed his chair back sharply, a scrape that drew heads around the restaurant. "I'm sorry this hurts, but that's how it is." And then he left. Just like that. Megan sat frozen. Her hand hovered over her glass, then fell to her lap. The world kept moving, waiters refilling drinks, a couple toasting an anniversary, the pianist playing a melody she couldn't place. But the chair across from her was empty, and the candle between them burned lower, wax dripping slowly. She stared into her wine and saw her reflection swirl in the deep red. It looked like a storm, chaotic, endless. When the first tear fell, it landed silently in the center, fracturing the image. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the scent of wet pavement lingered. When Megan finally stepped out of the Elmwood, her heels clicked against the cobblestones. Brooklyn Heights stretched out before her, quiet, indifferent. That night, under the soft glow of streetlights, she realized that endings rarely arrive with closure, only silence and the slow unraveling of everything familiar. Months passed. Patrick's new life unfolded high above the city, in a glass-walled apartment overlooking the East River. From that height, Brooklyn looked serene, rooftops touched by sunlight, bridges gleaming like strands of gold. The view was the kind people spent their lives chasing, yet even beauty felt hollow here. Linda moved through the apartment like she owned the air itself. Magnetic, dazzling, aflame, beautiful but dangerous. "Oh, Patrick, I love this dress," she said one evening, twirling in front of the gilded mirror above the marble fireplace. "I think I need 2 more. Maybe 3, for summer." Her laugh was high, bright, but hollow. Patrick sat on the couch, flipping through a glossy travel magazine he wasn't really reading. "With how good you look, who needs a vacation?" he said, the words automatic, lifeless from repetition. Linda turned, smiling that picture-perfect smile that had once captivated him. Back then, he'd mistaken it for joy. Now he was beginning to see it was something else entirely, performance. Their days became a cycle of indulgence. Dinners at candlelit rooftop restaurants, spontaneous waterfront shopping sprees, champagne before noon to celebrate the art of living. At first, it had felt exhilarating. But soon, even the bubbles in the glass seemed to lose their fizz too quickly. One night, at the theater, Linda leaned close while the orchestra tuned. "Patrick, have you thought about getting a new car? Something that really fits your status." He smiled faintly. "I like the one I have. It's got stories." She rolled her eyes playfully. "Old stories. Maybe it's time we write new ones, don't you think?" He laughed, but it sounded more like a sigh. Later, he realized her words weren't about the car. They were about him. By late August, the illusion was cracking. Patrick sat at the kitchen counter, staring at his laptop. Numbers on the screen didn't lie, credit card balances rising, savings slipping. A single green pea rolled off his plate, bouncing to the floor. For some reason, that tiny sound stuck with him. "Linda," he said quietly, closing the laptop, "maybe we should slow down. No more big spending for now." She looked up from her phone, eyebrow arched. "Oh, come on, love. Why so serious? Life's short. You have to enjoy it while you can." Her voice was syrupy, but steel hid beneath it. That night, Patrick lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling glowing with the city lights' reflections. Linda slept soundly, her hand draped lazily across the silk sheets. To anyone else, it would have seemed peaceful. To him, it was the quiet before a collapse. He was starting to see what he'd refused to see before. The colors Linda painted her world with were too bright to be real. Each day, the shine dulled. Each night, the silence grew louder. When he finally closed his eyes, he realized the life he'd chased, the one built on the ruins of what he'd left, wasn't freedom. It was a mirage. Beautiful, expensive, crumbling under its own weight. And somewhere beneath the same city lights, Megan was learning to rebuild, not from the pieces he'd left her, but from the strength she never knew she had. Morning light spilled softly through the tall windows of Megan's apartment, brushing the pale brick walls with a gentle golden warmth. The city beyond was still waking. Distant sirens, the rhythmic hum of the subway, the faint hiss of espresso from the cafe downstairs. Months had passed since her world had shattered at the Elmwood, but the memory lingered somewhere deep in her chest, quieter now, like an old wound that no longer bled. In the days after Patrick left, the apartment had felt like a stranger's home. Too still, too clean, too full of echoes. Grief had blurred everything. Mornings bleeding into nights, sleepless hours spent staring at the ceiling, trying to understand where it had all gone wrong. But slowly, like sunlight breaking through clouds, Megan began to rise again. "The only thing to do is move forward," she whispered one morning, her reflection staring back from the bathroom mirror. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying a promise she wasn't sure she could keep yet. She started small, taking walks along the promenade, buying fresh flowers for her kitchen, writing again in the journal she had abandoned months ago. Each act felt like a quiet rebellion against the sadness that had once held her captive. One afternoon, exploring downtown Brooklyn, she wandered into a tiny shop tucked between a bakery and an old record store. A hand-painted sign read Willow and Finch Bookshop. Inside, the air smelled of paper and rain, soft music drifting from somewhere in the back. She ran her fingers along the spines of books until one slipped from a high shelf and fell open at her feet. As she bent to pick it up, another hand reached at the same time. "Looks like this book's got a mind of its own," said a man with a warm smile and kind eyes, his voice grounding, like a familiar song she hadn't heard in years. Their hands brushed lightly, and they both laughed. "I guess it's telling us to read it," she said. He nodded. "Then I'd say we should listen." That's how she met Nathan. He had a way of slowing time. He spoke gently, thoughtfully, making people lean in. Their first conversation lasted hours, about poetry, travel, the city that never slept but somehow made you feel alive again when you'd lost your way. For the first time in years, Megan felt seen, not as someone broken, but as someone in the process of becoming whole. Weeks later, over coffee, Nathan asked, "Did you read that poem I sent you? The one about starting over?" She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "It hit harder than I expected." Strange how words can do that, remind you that change doesn't have to mean loss. Their afternoons became a quiet rhythm, visiting art galleries, sharing meals at cozy cafes, wandering through parks without filling every silence. Nathan didn't try to fix her. He didn't rush her healing. He simply walked beside her, and in that simplicity, she began to rediscover joy. One evening, strolling across the Brooklyn Bridge under a starry sky, he stopped and looked at her. "You're stronger than you think, Megan. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing up again when you do." His words lingered long after they said goodnight. That was when she realized Nathan hadn't come to replace what she'd lost. He was there to remind her she still had the power to rebuild. From that night on, something shifted inside her. The weight she'd carried began to lift. She smiled more easily, laughed more freely. The future, once uncertain, started to take shape again, with color, light, and possibility. Months later, on a lively Friday night, the Elmwood shimmered again with golden light and soft laughter. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, balancing trays of wine and flickering candles. Conversations mingled with the hum of jazz, and the air carried the scent of roasted garlic and butter. Patrick stepped through the doors, adjusting his jacket collar. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. He had walked into this place countless times before, but tonight felt different. The confidence that had once defined him now seemed like a mask he struggled to hold in place. As his eyes scanned the room, they landed on a familiar figure at a corner table by the window. Megan. She looked radiant, peaceful in a way he had never seen. Her laughter was light, effortless, filling the space around her. Across from her, Nathan sat relaxed, his gaze steady on her as if she were the only person in the room. They looked completely at ease, not because life was perfect, but because they had learned to meet it as it was. Patrick froze. A chill ran through him. Every instinct screamed to turn and vanish before the past caught up, but his feet wouldn't move. When Megan finally looked up and their eyes met, time seemed to slow. There was no anger, no bitterness, only quiet understanding. "Patrick," she said softly, calm and almost tender. "What a surprise." He swallowed, trying to steady his breath. "Megan, I didn't expect to see you here." Nathan, composed as ever, offered a polite nod. "Good evening, Patrick. I hope you're well." His tone was kind, but firm, a clear line drawn between past and present. Patrick managed a thin smile. His eyes lingered on Megan, taking in the confidence and serenity radiating from her. She had changed, not into someone new, but into someone free. "I see life's treated you well," he said quietly. She smiled, the corners of her lips lifting gracefully. "It has. I feel renewed." The word hit him like a blade, clean, silent, final. Regret pressed heavy in his chest. He wanted to say more, to apologize or explain, but the words refused to come. "I should go," he said at last. "Excuse me." As he turned, the sound of his footsteps echoed softly on the polished floor. The Elmwood looked the same soft lights, the same delicate music, but to him, it was unrecognizable. Every corner whispered of what he had lost. At their table, Megan and Nathan shared a glance, then returned to their conversation, their warmth unbroken. Laughter returned, brighter now, reclaiming the space that had once been tainted by sorrow. What had just happened wasn't awkward, it was closure. When Patrick stepped outside, the cold night hit him like a truth he could no longer ignore. The air was sharp and crisp, the city alive with the hum of passing taxis and the rustle of trees along the sidewalks. Each step felt heavier than the last. He looked up at the skyline, the lights stretching endlessly into the distance, and whispered into the wind. How did I let it all slip away? The question hung unanswered. The life he had chased, the glittering illusion of luxury and escape, now felt empty, cruel. He hadn't just lost Megan. He had lost the best parts of himself. The man he used to be had vanished somewhere between ambition and regret. As he walked under the streetlights, his breath visible in the cold, Megan's image lingered in his mind. Her grace, her laughter, her peace. Shame burned through him, followed by something quieter, almost tender. Admiration, perhaps. For the first time, Patrick understood she hadn't moved on to forget him. She had moved forward to remember herself. Inside the Elmwood, the soft murmur of conversation faded as a stillness settled over the corner table where Megan and Nathan sat. Golden light from the chandeliers shimmered against their glasses, throwing delicate reflections that danced between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Their eyes met, steady, calm, understanding. Nathan reached across the table, brushing his hand against hers. Their fingers intertwined effortlessly. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice low but filled with care. Megan closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deliberate, grounding breath. The air smelled faintly of roasted garlic and fresh herbs, mingling with the sweetness of wine. Around them, the restaurant carried on, waiters gliding between tables, laughter spilling from the bar, music floating faintly through the air. Yet inside her, there was peace, a kind she had never known before. When she opened her eyes, she smiled. It wasn't the hesitant smile of someone still healing, but the grounded, sure smile of a woman who had found her footing. "I've never felt better," she said, voice steady and true. "Thank you for being here. For everything." Nathan's thumb traced gentle circles against her hand. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You did all the hard work yourself." Her smile widened, because deep down, she knew he was right. The flicker of candlelight softened her features, highlighting the quiet strength in her expression. The woman sitting there was no longer the one who once cried herself to sleep, wondering what had gone wrong. She had rebuilt herself, piece by piece, through solitude, reflection, and the courage to begin again. In that silent moment, an unspoken truth lingered. They had both been through fire, and somehow emerged not scorched, but refined. Their story wasn't about perfection or fairy tale endings. It was about resilience, growth, and the quiet beauty of starting over. Megan's greatest victory wasn't simply that she had moved on. It was that she had transformed. The heartbreak that had once weighed her down became the soil where strength took root. Every tear, every lonely night, every doubt, each had shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, freer. Meanwhile, on the cold streets of Brooklyn Heights, Patrick walked alone. The night air bit at his face, sharp and sobering. The glow from the restaurant blurred behind him as he passed cobblestone sidewalks and wrought iron fences lining quiet brownstone blocks. His reflection flickered in the darkened windows of closed shops. He couldn't stop seeing her, Megan, radiant and at peace, laughing softly under golden light. The sound of her voice echoed faintly in his mind. For the first time, he didn't feel anger or longing, just a deep, aching realization. She was happy, and he had nothing to do with it. His breath rose in white clouds. "How did I let it all slip away?" he whispered, voice breaking into the emptiness. The truth he'd avoided for so long was undeniable now. He hadn't just lost her. He'd lost the version of himself that had made her feel safe. As he turned down a quiet side street, the city's hum returned, the subway rumbling below, a dog barking in the distance, laughter from a couple walking hand in hand. Life never paused for regret. The lights of Brooklyn shimmered across the East River, and for a fleeting moment, Patrick wondered if redemption was possible. Maybe one day he would learn to forgive himself, to face his own reflection without flinching. But tonight, all he could do was keep walking, step by step, through the chill, the silence, and the weight of what could have been. Back inside the Elmwood, Megan and Nathan clinked glasses softly, a quiet toast between two souls who had weathered storms and found calm seas. The restaurant's soft light wrapped the night in warmth. Outside, the city pulsed, eternal, indifferent, alive. Its rhythm carried forward, just as their lives would. In the endless crossroads of human experience, each of us is called to choose who we become after loss. What feels like an ending often turns out to be an invitation to evolve, rebuild, rise. Relationships shift, people change. Sometimes life breaks us only so we can discover the depth of our own resilience. True healing doesn't come from forgetting the pain. It comes from facing it, learning from it, and letting it reshape us. And that's where wisdom begins, in the quiet courage to start again. Perhaps the greatest grace of all is finding light after darkness, peace after turmoil, and love after loss. Because even after everything ends, the heart remembers how to hope. You just heard this one from Stories by Sue. If it resonated, don't forget to like and subscribe. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments. I'd love to hear. Thanks for watching.